So, after last week's suggestions in the comments on what to call the rear bodywork part of this car, I think we're going to settle on the rear clamshell. You're all clearly grown-ups, as I'm a bit surprised to not be calling it Booty McBootface or Trunky McTrunkface for my American friends. Either way, the job for this week is to start the process of finishing up the rough edges on the rear of the car before we head back to the front of the car for the final making it run bits down there. Now, the first part of tidying this all up at the back is to make sure I've got solid reference points to measure everything from. So this involved putting in bump stops for the clamshell to sit down onto. I'm doing this initially by just having the panel closed down onto a pair of bolts that I'm installing through the rear structure. Obviously, this probably won't do long term, as a metal-on-metal connection isn't ideal and will at worst rust, or at least squeak. So once this whole process is done, I'll replace these with rubber bump stops, but the bolts will do for now. The next job was to get rid of the two holes you may have noticed have been cut into the rear bodywork. These were originally there because I thought the mounting points for the folding roof needed to stick through, but with a bit of fine adjustment on that front and the new bump stops, we can just weld the holes up and call it good. To fill these, I cut a small square of 1mm steel sheet, welded on a tab so I could hold it whilst I put on the initial welds, and then seam welded around the whole thing. The really important thing here is to do a series of small tacks to avoid getting too much heat into the panel. If that happens, you get warping, and that can be really difficult to get flat again. In this case though, it all worked out fine, and with just a tiny skim of filler needed to smooth everything out. Next, I turn my attention to the actual boot or trunk lid. This uses the same sort of catch that I use for the doors, which originally came off a Fiat Barchetta. Now, I had previously got this all working before, but somewhere down the line I lost the plate that held everything together. So it was out with the cardboard, and by applying some serious measurement, made a new one. With that bracket nicely installed, I could then reassemble the boot lid onto the rear clamshell. I'd previously bonded all the mounting spacers into the correct places, so this goes on reasonably easily. But for fine adjustment, I then discovered my 17mm spanner fitted the job perfectly and allowed me to set perfect panel gaps all around. I think I might need to get some small gas struts to help with the opening of this, as I need to give the panel a healthy tug to get it to open. Or it may just be that I need to put in place all the sealing rubbers and they can give the latch a little push when you open it. Either way, the panel's back on the car and the rest of that is a job for some other time. Now, as it was getting a bit late in the day, there was just enough time to be able to apply that thin layer of filler over the patches we welded in earlier, plus a little extra to tidy up around the fuel filler hole. It's always amazing once you add a little filler to make things look that much more finished. Always, of course, avoiding the temptation to trowel it on in such great thickness that you can use it to cover up previous mistakes. Do you ever have one of those days where you wake up and just decide that this is a get stuff done sort of day? Well, that's the sort of mood I was in to get the next bit done. When I'd originally made the rear clamshell, I'd only actually tacked the edges together, and in the case of the right hand part of it, only even made half the edge at all. So it was a very boring thing to do, but I needed to get the left hand seam welded and then ground down before moving on to the right hand side. The critical part with all of this though is, as with welding the other patches that we did earlier, is to only weld in extremely small sections at a time and then give the metal plenty of time to cool down to avoid warping. The grinding process is actually the same, and in fact, if you're not careful, this can cause even more warping than the initial welding. So if you're using a grinder and you see the metal start to turn blue or even red, then you're grinding too slowly. Move on, let that bit cool down, and come back to it later.
Tell me how you sleep at night with all the things you've done. Maybe it's just gin and justifications. Tell me how you pray to gods whose hands are red with blood. As pretty as you are, it's pretty sad what you've become. Don't try to come and save my soul. Don't try to pray to bring me home. It's the last time you'll see me, last time to God. You're beautiful, you're sick inside.